My mom said I was unstable for liking books and being quiet, then moved me to the basement like trash. Now that the IRS is after my dad, they want my help. I said sure, if they confess publicly. Dinner that night started off like any other: roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. My mom lit the candles like she always did when she wanted to make a regular Wednesday feel special. But something in the air felt off. I could feel it before the words even left their mouths. "I'm glad everyone's here," my dad said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He looked at me and smiled, not the warm kind, the rehearsed kind. "We have some exciting changes coming up." I blinked, fork halfway to my mouth. "What kind of changes?" My mom looked at me, then over at my little sister, Avery, who was too busy mashing peas into her mashed potatoes to notice anything. "We're thinking it's time you had your own space," she said. "A little privacy." I looked back and forth between them. "What are you talking about?" "You're almost 17, Dad said. We figured it's time you moved down to the basement." I blinked. "The basement? Why would I? That place is freezing." "It's bigger," Mom cut in quickly. "You'll have more room to spread out. Think of it like your own little apartment." My stomach tightened. "But why now?" They exchanged a glance. That kind of glance that told me they'd rehearsed this, that they were bracing for pushback. "You've been keeping to yourself a lot lately," Dad said. "We thought maybe a little space would help you. Regroup." Regroup? I wasn't in a war. I was doing fine. I did my homework. I stayed out of trouble. I didn't party or sneak out. I didn't even complain when Avery blasted TikTok videos all night. "So Avery gets my room?" I asked slowly. Mom smiled. "We just thought it was time she had a bit more space too. She's growing up." "But I'm older." "Exactly," Dad said. "You're more mature. You can handle it." I knew then this wasn't about space or privacy. This was about moving me out of the way, out of sight. Avery beamed when she found out later. She got to pick out paint colors. She wanted fairy lights and a vanity. When she asked me if I was excited about my man cave, I just nodded. But the basement was damp, cold. The one tiny window barely let in any light. My mattress sat directly on the cement floor for 2 weeks before Dad finally helped me build a frame from leftover wood scraps in the garage. They never said it, not directly. But I started to notice the way they talked about me. Quiet, withdrawn, moody, like I was a problem no one could quite name. Like I didn't fit the family vibe anymore. I didn't fight it. I didn't say much at all. I just took my books downstairs and started sleeping next to a boiler that groaned all night. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't a gift. It was exile. And the worst part? They made it sound like it was for my own good. Settling into the basement felt like unpacking into a punishment. I tried to make it livable, hung up an old tapestry from Goodwill, stacked my books against the wall like makeshift shelves, even set up a tiny desk under the one flickering light bulb. But no matter what I did, it still felt like a storage closet someone forgot to lock. The mornings were the worst. I could hear everything through the floor: Avery's squealing laughter, Mom reminding her about lunch money, Dad making scrambled eggs just for her. No one ever knocked on the basement door to wake me up. I just set my own alarm and climbed the stairs in silence. Avery's new room looked like something from a magazine. String lights around the ceiling, a white faux fur rug, shelves filled with new books and makeup kits. Dad put in a wall-mounted TV for her birthday and even built her a little window seat. When I peeked inside one day, she yelled at me for invading her space. The difference was obvious. She got praised for everything. "Look how creative you are." If she drew a flower, "So responsible." If she took the trash out once. I brought home straight A's, and Mom just smiled like it was expected. When I told them I won a regional essay contest, Dad raised an eyebrow and said, "I guess that's what happens when you don't have friends to distract you." That one stuck. It was like every achievement I had was seen as a symptom, a sign that something was off. "He's always reading," Mom once said on the phone to Aunt Kelsey. "He never talks much. I just think he's a little closed off." Closed off. I wasn't. I just wasn't like Avery, loud and glittery and good at charming people. I never knew that made you defective. I overheard Dad once say to Mom in the kitchen, "We've got to keep an eye on him. He's not like her." You know what I mean. Yeah, I did. The basement got colder as the months passed. My space heater broke, and I told them. They nodded, said they'd get to it. They never did. I started sleeping in hoodies and socks. I brought down extra blankets from the hall closet when no one was looking. The insulation down there was garbage. I'd sit at my desk with fingers numb, trying to finish homework while the pipes groaned above me. Meanwhile, Avery was upstairs planning her themed birthday party. She wanted a tent in the backyard, fairy lights, a photo booth. She got all of it. I didn't even go. No one noticed. I didn't say anything, not out loud. But something inside me was shifting. I started to keep a journal, not poetry or feelings or anything like that. Just facts, observations, dates, quotes. I guess I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That this wasn't all in my head. They treated me like I was broken. So I started paying attention to who was really doing the breaking. It happened on a Saturday afternoon in early spring. Avery was at a sleepover, and Dad was working late. I was upstairs in the kitchen, grabbing a snack before heading back down to the basement. I wasn't trying to snoop. I didn't even mean to hear anything. Mom was on the phone, her voice low but clear, just around the corner in the living room. I froze the moment I heard my name. "He's always in that basement," she said, letting out a dramatic sigh. "He barely speaks to us anymore. I just worry he might be." "I don't know, unstable." My chest tightened. She paused, then added, "No, there hasn't been anything specific. He's different. He doesn't connect with people. Never has." I stood still, my hand on the fridge door, heart thudding in my ears. "He's never been like Avery," Mom continued, her voice softer now, but not soft enough. "She's so social, so open. He sits with his books all day. It's not normal. I think we might need to look into some help. Before it gets worse." My hands went cold. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound, and quietly headed downstairs. Help? That word echoed in my head all night. It wasn't concern. It wasn't love. It was about control. It was about turning me into a problem they could manage. The quiet kid, the one they didn't understand, the one they couldn't show off to their friends, that kid was now being painted as unstable. I sat on my mattress, staring at the wall. Something clicked in my brain that hadn't clicked before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't just parents being clueless. This was a story they were telling about me, and they were getting people to believe it. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even confront her. I just started thinking differently. If they were going to rewrite who I was, then I needed to start rewriting the ending. That night, I pulled out my laptop and started researching colleges. Not local ones. Not nearby state schools where I'd be expected to come home for holidays. I looked at schools across the country. Schools with full-ride scholarships. Programs that valued academics over small talk. I cleaned up my GPA spreadsheet, started working on essays. I made a checklist and taped it to the concrete wall above my desk. It was like flipping a switch. All the hurt, the resentment, it didn't disappear, but it got repurposed. I poured everything into my work. Studied late. Took on extra credit. I volunteered at the library. I built the kind of resume that couldn't be ignored. I never mentioned what I heard, but I never forgot it either. It became my fuel. They wanted to believe I was broken, that I was cold, distant, weird. Fine. Let them believe it. Because someday soon, I'd be gone. And the only thing they'd be able to say about me was that they didn't see it coming. But I did. I saw everything. The acceptance email came on a Thursday afternoon while I was sitting in the school library. I read it once, then again, not even sure I was seeing it right. Full scholarship. For years. Out of state. I didn't smile right away. I just sat there, letting it sink in. I had done it. I was getting out. When I got home, I didn't say anything right away. I waited until dinner, when we were all sitting around the table, the same way we always did. Avery was talking about some friend drama. Mom was nodding along, and Dad was scrolling through something on his phone. "I got into college," I said. They looked up. "Oh," Dad asked. "Which one?" "Westbridge University." Mom blinked. "That's in California, isn't it?" I nodded. "Isn't that a bit far?" she said, her voice too calm, too measured. "I got a full ride," I said. "Tuition, housing, everything." Avery let out a low whistle. "Dang, you're really leaving." "Yeah," I said. "I am." Dad set his fork down. "It just seems like you're rushing into this. Maybe we should talk about what's really going on." There it was. The implication. That I was running away from something instead of running toward it. "I'm not rushing," I said. "I've been planning this since last year." Mom reached for her wine glass. "I just hope you're not making this decision because you feel isolated or unsupported." That was almost funny. I almost laughed. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm making this decision because I'm ready." They didn't argue after that. Not really. But for the next few weeks, there was this weird energy in the house, like they were waiting for me to change my mind. Mom would drop hints like, "You'll miss Avery's senior year." Dad would say, "It's not too late to transfer to something closer." But I didn't budge. The day I left, I packed everything myself. Just 2 suitcases and a backpack. Avery gave me this awkward little side hug at the door. "Good luck out there," she said. "Don't go all loner freak on your dorm." I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked outside. No tears. No long goodbyes. I didn't look back. Not once. College felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater for too long. My dorm was nothing fancy, a standard twin bed, a desk, and a window that overlooked a patchy lawn. But to me, it felt like freedom. No creaky basement pipes. No muffled voices above my head. No judgment waiting for me at the dinner table. Just space. And quiet. Orientation week was overwhelming, but in a good way. So many new faces, new voices, new chances to start over. I didn't talk much the first few days. I was used to fading into the background, but nobody seemed to mind. And that made it easier to try. That's how I met Gabriella. She was in my American Lit class, sitting in the front row with a giant cup of coffee and a pen that clicked nonstop. One day after class, she turned to me and said, "You take crazy good notes. I was kinda cheating off you the whole time. Hope that's cool." I didn't know how to respond at first. I think I just laughed a little, surprised someone had actually noticed me in a non-weird way. From there, it became a regular thing. Coffee after class. Study sessions in the common room. Late-night walks when neither of us could sleep. Gabriella was the kind of person who made space for you without forcing it. She never pried, but she listened. Really listened. When she asked about my family, I kept it vague at first. "We're not that close," I said once. She just nodded and said, "Yeah, not everyone wins the family lottery." Meanwhile, my parents started checking in with increasing regularity. Not because they missed me, but because they were still trying to shape the story. Text from mom, just checking in. "Are you managing okay on your own? It's hard without support, I know." Call from dad. "Hey, son, you sound tired. You sure this wasn't a rash decision?" They didn't ask about my classes, or my new friends, or what I was excited about. Just vague concerns. Thinly veiled guilt trips. Like they were trying to plant seeds of doubt, subtle reminders that maybe I wasn't capable, that maybe I needed them. But I didn't reply. Not anymore. One night, Gabriella and I were sitting on a bench behind the library, the air crisp and quiet, our breath fogging up the cold. She looked over and asked, "You ever gonna tell me what really happened back home?" I hesitated, then said, "It's a long story." "I've got time," she said, and waited. So I told her. Not everything, but enough. About the basement, the silence, the way they made me feel like a stranger in my own home. When I finished, she didn't say anything right away, just shook her head slowly. "That's not normal," she said quietly. "That's not okay." And for the first time in my life, someone actually said it out loud. It wasn't just in my head. Gabriella didn't let it go. A few days after I told her about my family, she showed up at my dorm with a half-eaten bag of chips and a look that said she'd been thinking way too much. "You know that what you went through isn't just neglect, right?" she said, sitting cross-legged on my floor. "It's psychological abuse." I stared at her. I don't know. That feels like a strong word." "No, it's the right word," she said firmly. "Gaslighting. Emotional manipulation. Isolation. That's abuse, Ryan." I had never heard anyone say it so plainly. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend my parents out of habit, but the words didn't come. Because deep down, I already knew she was right. Later that week, I walked into the campus counseling office and made an appointment. I didn't even know what I was going to say, but I knew I needed to start talking to someone. Not just Gabriella. Someone objective. Someone who could help me make sense of it all. My therapist's name was Janelle. She didn't push. She just let me unpack things, little by little. The basement. The comments. The way they always framed my independence as a flaw. How Avery got the sunshine and I got the shade. Week after week, Janelle helped me unlearn the stories I'd grown up with. Like how being quiet wasn't a problem. Like how setting boundaries didn't make me selfish. Like how being unloved by your family doesn't mean you're unlovable. Outside of therapy, things were getting clearer too. I started noticing patterns I had ignored before. The way my parents would only text me when something was happening with Avery. The way they'd never ask how I was doing, only if I was managing okay. Like they were waiting for me to fail. They still posted pictures on social media, of course. Family game nights. Proud parent selfies with Avery's report cards or her new cheer uniform. Smiling faces, matching sweaters. That whole perfect family image. I was never in those pictures. I hadn't been in years. It didn't bother me as much as it used to. If anything, it felt fake now. Like watching strangers play a part in a play I wasn't cast in. In the spring, I got my grades back. Straight A's. One of my professors pulled me aside after class and asked if I'd consider applying for a research assistantship. I said yes. Gabriella took me out for milkshakes to celebrate. "You really did it," she said, nudging my arm. "You got out." "Not all the way," I said. "But I'm working on it." She smiled. "That's enough. For now." When graduation came a couple years later, I walked across the stage with honors. My name got called, people clapped, and I looked out into the crowd. No familiar faces. No signs or cheering relatives. Just Gabriella, standing and clapping, louder than anyone else. I didn't need the others there, because in that moment, I felt whole without them. And that was something I'd never felt before. It started with an email from my mom. Subject line, "Hi sweetheart, please read." I almost deleted it without opening, but curiosity won. Inside was a wall of text, full of words like, "We've been going through a rough time," and "I know you're busy, but we could really use your help." It was signed, "Love, Mom and Dad." That same night, Gabriella and I were sitting on the floor of our apartment, surrounded by takeout containers, when my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Avery. Avery, hey, don't know if you've heard, but things are kind of bad at home. Call Mom. That's how I found out. Their business, Dad's car parts distribution side hustle that he used to brag about over dinner, had been audited. And not the routine kind. Fraud-level audit. Apparently, they've been underreporting income for years. Now the IRS was involved. Fines. Possible charges. Frozen accounts. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a flicker of satisfaction. For years, they acted like I was the problem. Now the golden image was cracking. And suddenly, I wasn't a ghost anymore. Over the next week, I got 5 more emails. 2 texts. A voicemail from Dad, voice trembling just enough to sound human. Ryan, I know we've had our issues, but we need to come together now, as a family. That word, family, used to gut me. Now it just rang hollow. I told Gabriella everything. She listened quietly, then said, "What do you want to do?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces. They'd let me sleep in a basement while they built Avery a palace upstairs. They spent years convincing everyone I was the troubled one. But another part of me wanted closure. Not kindness. Not forgiveness. Just a reckoning. I'll help them, I said. But on my terms. Gabriella raised an eyebrow. Which are? They confess. To you. No, I said. Publicly. A week later, I sent an email to my parents. Polite. Formal. Cold. I'm willing to speak with you about potential support, but only if you're prepared to acknowledge, in full, what happened during my time at home. This includes the emotional abuse, the misrepresentation of my character, and the unequal treatment I endured. Any help will be contingent on a written and public statement accepting responsibility. No confession, no help. Ryan. They didn't respond at first. Then Avery texted again. Avery, they're freaking out. Mom cried. Dad's mad. What are you doing? I didn't reply. They wanted my help. Fine. But for once, they were going to face the truth. I wasn't a broken kid anymore. I was a grown man. And this time, they didn't get to tell the story. I did. They showed up at my apartment 3 days later. I watched from the living room window as Dad's old SUV pulled into the parking lot. It looked dusty, beat down, kind of like them when they stepped out. Mom clutched her purse like it was armor. Dad's shoulders sagged in a way I had never seen before. Gabriella stood next to me, calm as always. You sure you want to let them in? I nodded once. Yeah, I'm ready. I opened the door before they could knock. They looked older, tired, worn out by something bigger than time. But I didn't move aside. You said you wanted to talk, I said. Dad cleared his throat. Can we come in? I looked at them for a beat, then stepped back. They sat stiffly on the couch, I scanning the apartment. Gabriella handed them water and left us alone, though I knew she was listening from the bedroom. Mom spoke first. Ryan, we're sorry. Truly. Things have gotten. No, I said. Let's skip to the point. I reached over to the coffee table and picked up a thick folder. I dropped it in front of them with a dull thud. Inside were screenshots. Emails. Text messages. Notes I'd taken over the years. My observations from the basement. The quote about needing help that Mom had said on the phone. Avery's Instagram post of her remodeled room the day I moved downstairs. Everything. Dad flipped through it, his jaw tightening with every page. What is this? He asked quietly. Proof, I said, of how I was treated, of the narrative you created, of how you pushed me out, then acted like I chose to disappear. Mom looked like she might cry. Ryan, we never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said. And now, if you want help, you need to own that. In writing. Publicly. Dad stared at the folder. You want us to humiliate ourselves? I want you to be honest. Just once. They looked at each other. I could feel the tug of war between them. Pride versus desperation. The need to maintain an image versus the reality they could no longer avoid. Finally, Dad spoke. What exactly do you want us to say? I already wrote the draft, I said, pulling out a printed page from the back of the folder. I handed it to him. You can revise it, but it needs to stay true. He scanned it, eyes darting over the words. We acknowledge that we mistreated our son, Ryan, for many years. We created a narrative that isolated him, painted him as troubled, and favored his sibling without justification. We understand now that our actions caused deep emotional harm. We take full responsibility and are committed to making this right. We ask for forgiveness, but more importantly, we offer the truth. Mom's hands trembled as she read it. This will destroy our reputation. No, I said. It'll reveal it. Silence filled the room. Then, Dad nodded slowly. Okay. My throat tightened, but I kept my face steady. Good. When the statement's posted, we'll talk about next steps. They left quietly. No hugs. No forced apologies. Just a door closing behind them. I stood in the hallway long after they were gone, breathing in the stillness. Gabriella walked out and took my hand. How do you feel? I thought about it. About the basement. The lies. The silence. Like I finally turned the lights on. The confession went viral within 2 days. They posted it exactly as I gave it to them, right on their shared Facebook page. No spin, no excuses. Just the truth. People shared it, commented. Some praised them for owning up. Others, especially distant relatives and neighbors, were stunned. A few even messaged me. I had no idea you were going through that. They always talked about you like you were the difficult one. I'm so sorry, Ryan. It wasn't about the attention. I didn't care about internet sympathy or comment threads. What mattered was that they had finally said it out loud. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't broken. I had just been gaslighted for most of my life. In the weeks after, things started to shift. My parents mostly went quiet. Avery unfollowed me on everything. That part stung more than I expected, but I let it go. I'd stopped expecting things from them a long time ago. What surprised me was how light I felt. I hadn't realized how much of my energy had gone into carrying the weight of their version of me. Now that it was out in the open, I didn't have to argue anymore. Or explain. Or prove. I could just be. Gabriella and I started planning for the future, something I hadn't done in years. We talked about moving to a new city, one with better job options for her and more graduate programs for me. We joked about finding a tiny house with a big yard and a broken fence we'd never fix. One night, we sat on the fire escape outside our apartment, watching the lights flicker from the buildings across the street. You ever think about going back? She asked gently. I shook my head. Not really. They had years to choose me. They didn't. She nodded like she understood, because she did. I don't feel angry anymore, I added. Not even sad. Just done. Good, she said. You deserve to feel done. A few days later, I got a text from my mom. Just one line. We're trying to be better. I hope that means something to you. I didn't reply, because I wasn't waiting for them to get better anymore. That was never my job. My job was building the life they never believed I could. And I was doing it. One class, one boundary, one honest relationship at a time. I looked over at Gabriella. She was leaning her head on my shoulder, her hand wrapped in mine. I used to think my story started in the basement. But I was wrong. It started the day I climbed out of it, and never looked back.